When I saw the trailer for The Fall Guy several months ago, I was like, oh God, it's another movie remake of an old TV show that has little to nothing to do with the show. And why do they even call it that? And this looks dumb. And it's just like, oh boy, I don't know. And I went to go see it and I loved it. I loved it. Now, The Fall Guy was on when I was a kid on TV. I used to like it, but I didn't watch it that much. I used to watch, I feel like maybe something else was on at the same time as The Fall Guy. I'm going to talk about the movie, by the way. I think something else was on at the same time because I always used to watch the opening of The Fall Guy and I loved the theme song and I loved the montage of all the stunt work from various movies and it had a really fun opening. But then I think I usually would switch over to something else for some reason. But this film is not really based on the TV show. There are some similarities. What's this film about, by the way? Ryan Gosling stars as a stuntman, Colt Seavers, who has a fling with an assistant director played by Emma Blunt, and something goes wrong with a stunt that he's performing. He's the double for Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's this big, full of himself. Probably they're kind of maybe basing him on Tom Cruise, maybe. Johnson is this full of himself stuntman, and something goes wrong on the set, and Gosling, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. Gosling gets injured and kind of gets out of the game for a while, gets pulled back into the game by Johnson's producer, flies to Australia to work on this film, which is this weird futuristic sci-fi cowboy movie named Metal Storm, which I just amused me because when I was a kid, Metal Storm was the destruction of Jared Sin, one of those 1983 or so second wave of 3D scrap metal movies that I saw and always hoped that there would be a sequel to. The movie called Metal Storm, and Emily Blunt is now the director, and it's this kind of romantic comedy with the two of them on the set. The thing is, Aaron Taylor Johnson, the star, has gone missing and he's fallen in with a bad crowd. And his producer wants our hero, Colt Seavers, to use his connections with the guy to go and find out what happened to him. And thus, therein lies our tale, and there's intrigue, and there's guns, and there's stunts, and there's car chases, and it is a tremendous amount of fun. Again, almost nothing to do with the old show, aside from his name is Colt Seavers. He's a stuntman, and he drives in his personal life, he drives the same truck that Lee Majors drove on the old TV show. And then later, there's like a newer version of whatever that GMC truck was, and it has like a newer version of the paint job. Other than that, he's not a bounty hunter. It's not the same thing. So put that out of your mind, but don't worry about it. Like at first, my whole thing with movies, okay, when you do a movie like this, who are you making it for? Fans of the original show don't necessarily want to see somebody else playing the person they loved on the old show, and don't necessarily want to see a film that isn't a recreation of that show. They just kind of want the old show. So I don't think you're really making it for them. If you're making it for a younger audience that has never heard of the old show, why are you calling it the same name as the old show? That was what I went into with this. Now, I will say, fans of the old show, there are a couple little Easter eggs here and there under the end credits. What I really wanted out of this film, before all was said and done, I really wanted Ryan Gosling to cover the original theme song, which I love, with updated lyrics to reference modern movie stars, because the old show made references to Burt Reynolds and Farrah and Robert Redford and people who people don't really know anymore. They don't do that. They do have a cover, unfortunately. It's a country cover that updates the lyrics to refer to the scenario of the film. It's still fun. Oh boy, where to begin and where to end on this? I so loved this. As a kid, I loved movies about stunts. I idolized stuntmen and the cool stuff they did. I love action films because I grew up in an era where they proliferated, and then I got into the Hong Kong action. I have tremendous respect for stunt performers, stunt coordinators, stunt directors, all those people. The director of this film is David Leitch, who was a former stuntman and has made really fun movies. He did Bullet Train, which was a heck of a lot of fun. He did Hobbs and Shaw, which for me was the only worthwhile film in the Fast and the Furious series. Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2. He knows what he's doing. And, go figure. You have a former stuntman make a film that's stunt heavy, and you can see what's going on in the action sequences. You can clearly see what's going on, and thus letting you be impressed by the action and be impressed by the stunt work. Most films don't do that. Most films these days go out of their way to not let you see what's going on, and it always makes me mad because I'm like, people risk their lives and have this immense talent, and you're shaking the camera all over the joint and you can't really see anything. This film doesn't do that. This film presents it very cleanly, and it is so much fun. Tons of action. It's very funny. Gosling is great at slightly doofusy comedic action. If you've never seen The Nice Guys, that was the last Ryan Gosling action comedy that not enough people went to see, and we were denied the pleasure of a sequel to. Apparently, as I'm recording this, The Fall Guy is not doing that well in the theaters, and I would love to see more of these. I want to see more movies with these characters where she's directing a film and he's a stuntman in it, and there's some intrigue somewhere around the world, and then just give us as many crazy stunts as you can. This brings to mind the world of Hal Needham, who I'm a big fan of, who directed Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run and Rad and various other, Hooper, which was a great movie about stuntmen. The world of Hal Needham was he was a former stuntman. He was king of the stuntmen, and he got into making movies, and he basically wanted to employ all his friends. So they were super stunt-heavy films. Every reason to have a stunt in the movie, he did. This movie feels like that, and it's a wonderful throwback. People talk so much about 80s style this and return to 80s that, and it never feels like that to me. This film does not pander to any kind of 80s stylistic visual or anything like that, but this feels more 80s than most movies that are trying to be like an 80s film. It's just the fact that they call it The Fall Guy, to get back to that, they could have just as well called this something else. Now, the title The Fall Guy totally makes sense for what the story of this film is. And I'm not going to say why, but once you see it in the end, you'll be like, okay, yeah, they earned that title, The Fall Guy. But they could have just as easily called it Falling for You. They could have just as easily called this Hooper, because this movie would have as much to do with the previous film entitled Hooper as this film does with the previous show entitled The Fall Guy. And again, nothing against this, because it's so good. I had so much fun with this. This is the first film in a really long time that I've gone to see where I felt like I would go back within a day or two and see it again. And I am going to go see it again in the theater on the big screen with that great soundtrack. It makes use, much like Godzilla X Kong did recently, only in this film, Kiss's I Was Made for Lovin' You, it opens the film and it plays repeatedly throughout the film. There's orchestrated versions of it, which made me giggle. There's a slowed down, soulful cover of it at one point in the film where things get a little serious, and I just love that they use that. I'm a big Kiss fan, so anytime I can hear that pumping through the surround sounds, it's pretty good. One thing about Aaron Taylor Johnson, who a lot of people, you might know him from Kick-Ass and from a lot of other things, but a lot of people are saying he should be the next James Bond. I say he's too young. One thing about him is they missed the opportunity to go one step further. I always point out Americans in films. So many movies include, although Emily Blunt is allowed to be British in this film, because shockingly, apparently, there are people who work in this country who have British accents. Almost every movie you see has somebody who's British or Australian playing an American for some reason. And Aaron Taylor Johnson is British, and he plays an American in this. And I thought it would have been a nice one more meta step in how much this film spoofs Hollywood and Hollywood excess and blockbuster ridiculousness, to have Johnson be a British actor who pretends to be American in the film, but they don't do that. It's super respectful of stunt people. The stunt sequences are practical, meaning there's not I think they maybe used a little green screen for things, but it's not BS CGI foolishness. It's real stunt people doing real stuff. There's a wonderful melee at one point, much like Hooper, where there's a bunch of stunt people basically using the tools of stunting, using the tools they would use in making a film to engage in just a huge fight. It makes fun of dumb Hollywood blockbusters in a wonderful way. There's a funny little dig at one point where somebody is like, "Oh, you're a stuntman, right? Did they give out Oscars for that?" And Gosling's like, "Yeah, no, they don't," which was a recent thing about the Oscars maybe finally giving an award for stunt coordination or stunt work, and that going off to something else. It was like laugh out loud funny repeatedly for me. It was nice to see the Stunts Unlimited and the Stunt Women's Association logos like on the set in the film prominently, because they're the heroes behind every cool action movie you've seen more or less for the last 50 years. I want more of this film. I want more of these movies. I really want people to go out and see this in the theater and buy it when it hits video. I want more adventures of Colt Seavers, whether he becomes a bounty hunter or a secret agent or just keeps making movies and being that lovable doofus that he is. The problem is, I've long said, I feel like general audiences, normal people who aren't cinemaniacs, if you will, don't care about movies about movies. I think the general public doesn't want to watch a movie about people making a movie. It's too inside. It's too New York and LA, especially Hollywood. I think people in Hollywood sometimes lose sight of the fact that the process of how movies are made is not interesting to everybody. And I always feel like, with very few exceptions, movies about movies, they can be great and they can have a strong following, but they never really do well overall. And I'm worried that that's probably the problem with this movie, that people just are not interested. I always say people don't want to read a book about somebody trying to write a book. People don't want to listen to a song about somebody wanting to listen to trying to write a song. They just want to listen to a song, read a book, or watch a movie. So at any rate, please, I've talked long enough that you've probably missed the next showing of this or whatever. And if this is years later, if you are someone if you are people of the future watching this, find The Fall Guy and watch it, and then watch the old show too, because I have the first season on DVD and I popped it in the other night, and it's a tremendous amount of fun. Either way, Fall Guy in theaters now, or on video if you watch this later.